Before we begin our descent into those ancient corridors of prayer and perpetual silence, I ask you to pause for a moment. Leave a comment below with your current time in the city where you are listening from tonight. Perhaps you are in London at midnight, the rain streaking down your window. Perhaps you are in Chicago at 10 in the evening, the distant hum of traffic fading into the background. Perhaps you are in Sydney as the first gray light of dawn begins to seep through your curtains. Wherever you are, whatever hour the clock shows, know that you are joining a quiet congregation of listeners scattered across the world, all seeking the same gentle escape into the distant past. Tonight, we travel backwards through the centuries, past the noise of our modern world, past the Industrial Revolution and its belching smokestacks, past the age of exploration and its restless ships, past the medieval wars and their clashing swords, until we arrive at a place where time moved differently. We arrive at the heavy wooden gates of a Benedictine monastery, somewhere in the green and rain-soaked countryside of medieval Europe. In the year of our Lord 1243, the journey has been long. You have walked for 3 days along muddy roads, past villages where thin smoke rose from thatched roofs, past fields where peasants bent over their endless labor, past forests where the trees grew so thick that the light turned green and dim. Your feet ache. Your woolen cloak is damp from the morning mist that has not lifted since dawn. And now, as the afternoon light begins to fade towards that particular gray that announces the coming of evening, you see it rising from the valley below Dot, the monastery. Stone walls the color of old bone. A bell tower pointing towards the heavy sky. Smoke rising from somewhere within those walls, promising warmth and perhaps a bowl of thin soup. The path leads downward through a meadow where sheep graze in complete indifference to your passage, their wool matted and gray, their heads bent to the grass in that eternal rhythm of grazing that has not changed in 1,000 years. You reach the gate. It is made of oak, darkened by age and weather, reinforced with iron bands that have begun to rust at the edges. There is a small door set within the larger door, a door within a door, and beside it hangs a rope. You pull the rope. Somewhere deep within those walls, a bell sounds. And then you wait. The wind moves through the grass behind you. A crow calls from somewhere in the distance. The sheep continue their grazing. Time passes with that particular slowness that belongs only to the medieval world, a world without clocks on every wall, without schedules and appointments, without the modern anxiety of minutes and seconds slipping away. The small door opens. A face appears. It is the face of an old monk, weathered and lined like the bark of an ancient oak, his eyes pale and watery, his head shaved in the tonsure that marks him as one who has renounced the vanities of the world. He does not smile. He does not frown. He simply looks at you with an expression that belongs to someone who has seen many travelers arrive at this gate, each one carrying their own burden of sin and sorrow and the desperate hope for something they cannot name. Asterisk, he asks what you seek, and you tell him what all those who arrive at these gates eventually tell him. You seek refuge. You seek silence. You seek to leave behind the noise and chaos of the world outside. You seek to become one of them, a monk, a servant of God, an inhabitant of this place, where time moves like honey, and the only sounds are the bells that mark the hours of prayer. The old monk nods slowly, as if he has heard these words 1,000 times before, which he has. He steps aside. He gestures for you to enter. And as you duck through that small door, as the heavy wood closes behind you with a sound that echoes through the empty courtyard, you feel something change within you. The world outside begins to fade. The world inside begins to take shape around you, solid and real and overwhelming in its silence. Welcome to the monastery. Welcome to the life that awaits you within these walls. Let us walk together through the seasons of this place, from the first light of dawn to the last whisper of Compline, from the frozen depths of winter to the heavy heat of summer, and discover what it truly meant to live in a world where every hour belonged to God. Asterisk. The courtyard where you now stand is called the cloister, and it will become the center of your new existence. It is a square of open space surrounded by covered walkways, columns of stone supporting arched roofs that provide shelter from the rain that falls so often in this country. In the center of the cloister, there is a well, its stone rim worn smooth by the hands of generations of monks who have drawn water from its depths. Beside the well, there is a small garden where herbs grow in careful rows, lavender and rosemary and sage, their scents mingling in the damp air. The cloister is never truly empty. At any hour of the day or night, you might see a monk walking slowly along the covered passages, his hands folded within the sleeves of his black habit, his eyes cast downward in meditation. You might see another monk sitting on a stone bench, a manuscript open on his lap, his lips moving silently as he reads the words of ancient saints. You might see a young novice sweeping the stones with a broom made of bound twigs, the rhythmic swish of his labor the only sound in the heavy silence. From the cloister, passages lead to all the other buildings that make up this small world within walls. To the north lies the church, the heart of monastic life, a building of gray stone with narrow windows that filter the light into thin beams that move across the floor as the sun travels its daily arc. The church is cold, even in summer. The stone walls hold the chill of centuries. And when you enter for the first prayers of the day, your breath will form small clouds in the air before you dot. To the east of the cloister lies the chapter house, where the monks gather each morning to hear a chapter from the Rule of St. Benedict read aloud, where the abbot speaks to his community, where confessions of minor faults are made and penance is assigned. The chapter house has wooden benches along its walls, worn smooth by the countless monks who have sat upon them, listening to the same words that have been spoken in this place for hundreds of years. To the south lies the refectory, the dining hall where the monks take their silent meals. Long wooden tables stretch the length of the room, their surfaces scarred by knives and stained by the spills of generations. At one end of the refectory, there is a wooden pulpit built into the wall, accessible by a narrow staircase. From this pulpit, one monk reads aloud during every meal, his voice the only sound as the others eat in silence, spooning their soup, breaking their bread, never speaking a word. To the west of the cloister lies the dormitory, a long room filled with simple beds, each one nothing more than a wooden frame, a straw mattress, and a single woolen blanket. The beds are arranged in rows, with narrow passages between them. There is no privacy here. The monks sleep side by side, their breath mingling in the darkness, their dreams perhaps shared in some mysterious way that belongs only to those who live in such close community. Beyond these central buildings, there are others that serve the practical needs of this small society. There is a kitchen with a great hearth, where fires burn from before dawn until after dark, where pots of soup simmer endlessly and bread bakes in stone ovens. There is a bakery where the smell of rising dough fills the air each morning. There is a brewery where ale is made, a weak ale that the monks drink with their meals, because the water from the well is not always safe. There is a laundry where habits are washed in great wooden tubs, the water heated over fires, the soap made from ash and animal fat. There is a scriptorium, a room filled with high desks where monks spend their days copying manuscripts, their quills scratching across parchment in that endless labor of preservation that kept the knowledge of the ancient world alive through the long centuries of the medieval age. The scriptorium has large windows to let in as much light as possible, for candles are expensive and their flickering flame is hard on the eyes. In winter, when the light fades early, the monks must stop their work and wait for the dawn dot. There is an infirmary for those who fall ill, a building set slightly apart from the others, where the sick are tended by a monk who has some knowledge of herbs and remedies. The infirmary is the only place in the monastery where meat is permitted, for the sick need strength to recover. The smell of sickness hangs in the air there, mingled with the scent of the medicinal herbs that hang drying from the rafters. There is a guest house for travelers, for monasteries served as the hotels of the medieval world, offering shelter to pilgrims and merchants and wanderers of all kinds. The guest house has its own entrance from outside the walls, so that visitors need not disturb the silence of the cloister. The guest master, a monk appointed to care for visitors, moves between the two worlds, bringing news from outside to those who have renounced the outside world dot. And there are the gardens and fields that surround the monastery, worked by the monks themselves and by the lay brothers who live among them, but have not taken the full vows of monastic life. These fields produce the wheat that becomes bread, the vegetables that fill the soup pots, the grapes that become the wine used in the celebration of Mass. The monks work these fields in their habits, their hems growing muddy, their hands calloused by the handles of hoes and scythes. This is the geography of your new world. These are the spaces where you will spend the rest of your days, moving from church to cloister, to refectory to dormitory, from field to kitchen to scriptorium, in an endless cycle of prayer and labor that will continue until the day you die. The walls that surround this place are not meant to keep you prisoner. They are meant to keep the world out, to create a space where nothing intrudes upon the great work of seeking God. Walk with me now through a single day in this place, from the first bell that sounds in the darkness before dawn to the last prayer that whispers through the cold stones of the church, before sleep takes you once more. The night is at its deepest when you first hear it. The bell, a single note, low and resonant, cutting through the silence of the dormitory like a knife through dark water. You have been asleep for perhaps 3 hours, perhaps 4, the sleep of exhaustion that comes from a body unused to this life of constant prayer and constant labor. Your straw mattress has grown familiar to your bones. Your single woolen blanket has trapped just enough of your body heat to keep you from shivering. The bell sounds again, and again, and the darkness around you begins to stir. You hear the rustle of blankets being pushed aside. You hear the soft pad of bare feet on cold stone. You hear the whisper of woolen habits being pulled over shivering bodies. No one speaks. The rule of silence holds even now, in the darkness before dawn. In this moment of waking, It feels more like a continuation of sleep than any true return to. Consciousness. The hour is approximately 2 in the morning. Though no one here thinks in terms of hours and minutes as we understand them. The monks know only that this is the time of matins, the first of the 8 daily services that structure their lives, the night office that belongs to the deepest darkness, the prayers that rise from the earth like smoke when most of the world is lost in dreams. You swing your legs over the edge of your bed. Your feet touch the floor, and you feel the shock of cold stone, the chill that has seeped into these floors from the frozen ground beneath the monastery. You have learned to dress quickly in the darkness, to pull your habit over your head with practiced movements, to find your sandals by touch alone. There is no light in the dormitory. Candles are precious, and their use is reserved for the church and the scriptorium. The monks have learned to navigate this darkness by memory, by the feel of familiar surfaces under their hands. You join the silent procession that moves from the dormitory towards the church. The covered walkway that connects these buildings offers some protection from the weather, but the cold air still bites at your face, still finds its way beneath your habit to chill the skin beneath. The sky above is black, unmarked by stars tonight, hidden behind the thick clouds that have covered this land for days. The rain that fell yesterday has stopped, but the air still smells of moisture. Of wet stone and wet earth. The church door opens before you, and you enter into a space that is somehow colder than the outside air. The stone walls have absorbed centuries of cold. The narrow windows let in nothing at this hour. The only light comes from a few candles burning near the altar, their flames steady in the still air, casting long shadows that seem to move with a life of their own. You find your place in the choir stalls. These are wooden seats arranged in 2 rows facing each other across the central aisle of the choir, the space where the monks gather for their prayers. The wood has been worn smooth by generations of bodies, the armrests polished by the hands of monks long dead. You lower yourself onto the seat and feel its familiarity beneath you, the particular contours that have become as known to you as your own body. The abbot enters. He is an old man, his face barely visible in the candlelight, his movements slow with age, but certain with the authority of his position. He takes his place in the largest stall, the one at the eastern end of the choir, facing the altar. He makes a small gesture, and the first psalm begins. The voices of the monks rise in the darkness. They are not singing exactly, but chanting, a form of musical prayer that predates any hymn you might know, a form that belongs to the earliest centuries of Christian worship. The Latin words flow through the cold air, their meaning lost most of the monks who speak them, for few of these men can read Latin with true understanding. But the sound of the words is enough. The rhythm is enough. The rising and falling of the voices in the darkness is its own form of meaning. Psalm follows psalm. The monks stand. The monks sit. The monks bow. The movements are choreographed by centuries of tradition, by the rule that governs every aspect of their lives. There is a reading from Scripture, the words spoken by a single voice in the darkness. There is a hymn, the notes rising towards the stone ceiling and disappearing into the shadows. There is a period of silence, a space for private prayer, a void in which each monk confronts his God, alone in the theater of his own mind. Matins lasts for approximately 90 minutes, though the length varies with the season and the feast day. In winter, when the nights are longest, the night office stretches to fill the darkness. In summer, When dawn comes early, the monks have less time in this vigil of prayer. Tonight is somewhere between, a night in late autumn, when the world is turning towards winter, but has not yet surrendered to its grip. The service ends. The monks file out of the church in the same silence with which they entered. But they do not return to their beds. The night is too far gone for more sleep. Instead, they have a few hours of private time for reading, for meditation, for the kind of prayer that cannot be shared. Some of the monks return to the dormitory to sit on their beds in the darkness, their lips moving in silent supplication. Others find quiet corners in the cloister, their backs against the cold stone columns, their minds turned inward. You have learned to use this time for the practice called Lectio Divina, the divine reading, a form of meditation on Scripture that differs from ordinary reading, as bread differs from stone. You do not read for information. You do not read for entertainment. You read to let the words sink into you, to let them become part of your flesh and bone, to let them transform you from the inside out. You choose a passage, perhaps a single verse, perhaps only a few words, and you repeat them over and over in your mind until they cease to be words at all and become instead a kind of door, a portal into something beyond language. The darkness begins to lighten almost imperceptibly. The black of the sky softens to the darkest gray. The birds begin to stir in the trees beyond the walls, their first tentative notes breaking the silence that has held since the end of matins. The world is turning towards dawn, and with the dawn comes the next bell, the next service, the next step in the endless cycle of prayer that defines this life. The bell sounds again, and this time there is a quality to its tone that speaks of ending and beginning, of the night dying and the day being born. This is the call to lauds, the prayers of praise that greet the dawn, the second of the 8 daily offices that punctuate the monastic day. You rise from your place in the cloister, where you have been sitting with a psalter open on your lap, though the light has been too dim to read. You have been watching the sky instead, watching the slow transformation from black to gray to that particular shade of pale that means the sun is about to break over the horizon. The air has grown colder as the night has worn on, a phenomenon that always surprises you. The way the coldest hour comes not in the middle of the night, but at its end, just before the warmth of the new day begins. The procession to the church is quicker this time. The monks have been awake for hours now. Their bodies have adjusted to the cold. Their minds have been prepared by the long vigil of prayer and meditation. You take your place in the choir stalls again, and this time there is enough light filtering through the narrow windows that you can see the faces of your brothers across the aisle. They are pale in the gray light, their expressions empty of anything that might be called emotion, their eyes fixed on the prayer books open before them. Lauds begins with an invitatory, a call to prayer that has been spoken in these same words for over 1,000 years. The words are Latin, ancient and formal, carrying the weight of all the generations who have spoken them before you. Venite, adoramus Dominum. Come, let us adore the Lord. The monks respond in unison, their voices blending into a single sound that seems to fill the church from floor to ceiling. The sounds of lauds are different from those of matins. They are psalms of praise, of thanksgiving, of joy at the gift of a new day. The melodies are brighter, more ascending, as if the music itself is trying to climb towards the light that is now beginning to stream through the eastern windows. The candles that burned in the darkness are no longer necessary. The natural light of dawn is filling the church, revealing the details that were hidden in the night. You can see the altar now, draped in cloth the color of old wine. You can see the crucifix above it, carved from dark wood, the figure of Christ hanging with arms outstretched in that eternal gesture of suffering and redemption. You can see the paintings on the walls, faded now with age, depicting scenes from the lives of saints whose names you are still learning. You can see the worn stones of the floor, shaped by the feet of monks who walked these same paths centuries before you were born. Lauds includes readings from Scripture, a canticle from the Gospel of Luke, known as the Benedictus, and prayers of intercession for the Church, for the world, for those who have asked for the prayers of this community. The service is shorter than Matins, perhaps 45 minutes, but it feels different. The quality of the light changes everything. The quality of the voices changes. There is something hopeful in the prayers of dawn that is absent from the prayers of midnight. The service ends with the Lord's Prayer, spoken not chanted, the Latin. Words familiar even to those who know nothing else of this ancient language. Pater Noster, quies in Celis, Our Father, who art in heaven. The words float in the still air of the church, rise towards the rafters, disappear into the silence that follows. The monks file out of the church. For the first time since waking, they break their silence. Not with speech, but with the sounds of ordinary life, coughing, shuffling feet, the creak of aged joints. These sounds are permitted now, in the transition time between lauds and the next gathering. The silence of the deep night has lifted, replaced by the working silence of the day. Asterisk, asterisk. The interval between lauds and prime is brief, perhaps 15 minutes, just enough time for the monks to attend to their most basic needs. There are latrines in a building at the far edge of the monastery, simple holes cut in a wooden bench. Above a pit that is emptied by lay brothers once a month, there is a trough with cold water where the monks wash their faces, their hands, the sleep from their eyes. There is a brush with stiff bristles for cleaning teeth, though most of the older monks have few teeth. Left to clean God, you move through these morning rituals with the efficiency of practice. The water is cold, shockingly so, and you feel your skin tighten against the chill. You dry your face with a rough cloth and feel more awake than you have felt since the first bell pulled you from sleep. Your stomach growls, reminding you that you have not eaten since yesterday evening, but food will have to wait. There are prayers still to be said. Business still to attend to. Prime is the shortest of the offices, a brief service that marks the first hour of the working day. The monks gather once more in the church, recite a hymn, chant a few psalms, offer a prayer for the day ahead. The whole service takes perhaps 15 minutes. Its purpose is not the elaborate worship of matins or the joyful praise of lauds. Its purpose is simply to consecrate the new day, to offer the hours ahead to God before they are spent in labor. After prime, the monks gather in the chapter house for the daily meeting that gives this space its name. They enter through a low doorway and take their places on the benches that line the walls. The room is square and plain, its walls whitewashed, its ceiling supported by sturdy wooden beams. A single large window lets in the morning light, and in that light, the faces of the monks are clearly visible for the first time today. The abbot enters last and takes his seat in the carved chair at the head of the room. He is a man of perhaps 60 years, though he looks older. His face is deeply lined, his eyes sunken in their sockets, his hands gnarled with the same joint disease that afflicts so many who have spent decades in cold and damp stone buildings. But his voice is strong, and when he speaks, the room falls into attentive silence. The chapter meeting begins with a reading from the Rule of St. Benedict. One chapter each day, read aloud by a monk appointed to this task, the words spoken slowly and clearly so that even those with failing hearing can follow. The rule governs every aspect of monastic life. It tells the monks when to pray, when to work, when to eat, when to sleep. It tells them how to treat one another, how to receive guests, how to correct faults, how to seek God in all things. The rule has been read daily in this chapter house. For centuries, the same words spoken over and over until they have become as familiar as breathing. Today's chapter concerns the distribution of work within the monastery. The rule states that the monks should do their own cooking, their own cleaning, their own labor in the fields. It states that no one should be above any task, that even the abbot must be willing to serve in the kitchen if needed. The words are ancient, but their meaning remains clear. This is a community of equals, a place where the distinctions of the outside world have been erased. After the reading comes the chapter of faults. This is a form of public confession, though not of sins exactly. The monks are expected to confess their minor violations of the rule, the small failures that accumulate in any community of imperfect humans. One monk rises and admits that he arrived late to matins last night, that he was slow to rise from his bed. Another confesses that he spoke unnecessary words to a brother in the cloister. A third admits that he dozed during the reading at dinner. The abbot listens to each confession with the same expression of patient attention. He assigns penances, small acts of discipline meant to reinforce the importance of the rule, an extra psalm to be recited, a period of prostration before the altar, a day of fasting on bread and water. The penances are not meant to be punishments in the way we understand punishment. They are meant to be reminders, opportunities for the monk to deepen his commitment to the life he has chosen. Sometimes the chapter of faults becomes more serious. If a monk has committed a grave violation of the rule, he must confess it here before his brothers. If he has shown open disrespect to a superior, if he has failed to attend an office without excuse, if he has struck another monk in anger, the confession must be made, and the penance will be severe. Expulsion from the community is rare but not unknown. The monastery cannot tolerate those who refuse to submit to its discipline. The chapter meeting also includes the business of the community. The abbot announces the work assignments for the day. He reports on the state of the monastery's finances, the harvest from the fields, the needs of the guest house. He reads any letters that have arrived from other monasteries or from the bishop who oversees this community. The monks listen in, silence, absorbing the information that connects them, however tenuously, to the world beyond their walls. The meeting ends with a prayer. The monks rise from their benches, bow to the abbot, and file out of the chapter house into the morning light. The working day has officially begun. Asterisk, asterisk, the sun is now fully above the horizon, casting long shadows. Across the cloister, as the monks disperse to their various tasks, the air has warmed slightly, though the cold of the night still lingers in the stones, still seeps through the thin sandals that are the monks' only footwear. The sky is gray this morning, as it is so often in this country, the clouds low and heavy with the promise of rain. You have been assigned to work in the scriptorium today. This is considered one of the lighter duties, suitable for those who are educated enough to read and write, those whose hands are skilled enough for the delicate work of copying manuscripts. Not all monks possess these abilities. Many come from peasant backgrounds, their hands more suited to the hoe than the quill. They are sent to the fields, to the kitchen, to the workshops, where the practical necessities of monastic life are produced. The scriptorium is on the second floor of the building that lies east of the cloister, above the chapter house. You climb a narrow stone staircase, your hand on the wall for balance, the steps worn concave by centuries of ascending feet. At the top of the stairs, a wooden door opens into a long room filled with morning light. The scriptorium is designed to capture as much natural light as possible. Large windows line one wall, their glass thick and slightly warped, filling the room with a diffuse illumination that is kind to aging eyes. High desks are arranged in rows, each one angled to catch the light, each one equipped with a pot of ink, a selection of quills, a penknife for sharpening, and the precious sheets of parchment on which the work of copying is done. Asterisk, asterisk, you take your place at your assigned desk. The manuscript you are copying is a psalter, a book of psalms, one of dozens being produced by this monastery for sale to wealthy patrons. The original lies open before you, its pages yellowed with age, its Latin text written in the precise hand of a monk who died long before you were born. Your task is to reproduce this text exactly, letter by letter, word by word, preserving it for future generations who will pray these same words in the centuries to come. Asterisk, asterisk, the work of copying is slow and painstaking. You must first prepare your quill, cutting the tip to the exact angle that will produce the letters you need. You must mix your ink, adding water to the dried pigment until it reaches the consistency that will flow smoothly from the quill, but not spread upon the parchment. You must rule your parchment with faint lines, guidelines that will keep your text straight and even. Only then can you begin the actual work of writing. Asterisk, asterisk. The room fills with the soft scratching of quills on parchment. A dozen monks sit at their desks, each one bent over his work, each one lost in the meditative rhythm of copying. The scriptorium is silent except for this sound and the occasional clink of a quill being dipped into an inkpot. No one speaks. The rule forbids unnecessary conversation during work, and the work of copying requires concentration that speech would only disrupt. The hours pass slowly. Your hand begins to cramp from the repetitive motion of forming letters. Your eyes begin to ache from the strain of reading the small text before you. Your back begins to protest from the hunched position that copying requires. But you do not stop. You cannot stop. The morning work period will continue until the bell calls you to the next office, and you must make progress on your task. You have copied perhaps 2 pages when the first interruption comes. A young novice enters the scriptorium carrying a tray with cups of weak ale and a small loaf of bread. This is the mid-morning refreshment, a recognition that the human body cannot work for hours without sustenance. The monks pause in their labors, drink their ale, eat their bread in silence, and then return to their copying without a word exchanged. The morning continues. The light changes as the sun rises higher in the sky, moving across the room in a slow progression that you have come to know intimately. When the beam of light reaches the 3rd pillar from the door, you know that the hour of terce is approaching. When it reaches the 4th pillar, the bell will sound. And it does. The bell calls you from your work, summons you back to the church for the third office of the day. You set down your quill, close the inkpot to prevent it from drying out, and join the procession of monks descending the narrow staircase. Behind you, your morning's work remains on the desk. 2 pages of careful lettering that will be examined by the master of the scriptorium for any errors that must be scraped away and corrected before the manuscript can. Continue, ****, terce is the office of the third hour, meaning approximately 9 in the morning, according to the Roman system of time that the Church still follows. It is one of the minor hours, shorter and simpler than the great offices of matins and vespers. A hymn, a few psalms, a brief prayer, and the monks are released again to their labors. But you do not return to the scriptorium immediately. The time between terce and the next office, sext, is short, and you have been assigned to help in the kitchen today, as all monks are assigned in rotation, regardless of their other duties. The kitchen is hot and loud compared to the quiet of the scriptorium, a world of clanging pots and hissing steam, and the constant crackle of the fires that burn in the great hearths. Brother Cellarer, the monk responsible for the physical welfare of the community, is directing the preparation of the midday meal. He is a large man, his habit stained with the evidence of his labors, his face red from the heat of the fires. He moves through the kitchen with surprising grace for his size, tasting, stirring, adjusting. His knowledge of cooking accumulated over decades of practice. Today's meal will be a vegetable pottage, a thick soup of whatever vegetables are available from the monastery's gardens. It is late autumn, and the harvest has brought in turnips, parsnips, cabbages, and the last of the beans. These are being cut into chunks by a row of monks working at a long wooden table, their knives moving in a rhythmic percussion that fills the kitchen with its sound. The vegetables are thrown into great iron pots that hang over the fires, where they will simmer for hours until they soften into a mass that can be ladled over bread. You are assigned to the bread. The loaves have already been baked in the early morning, pulled from the stone ovens while the monks were at lauds. Your task is to slice them into portions, one for each monk, using a long knife that has been sharpened so many times that its blade is now thin as a leaf. The bread is coarse and dark, made from rye flour that is all the monastery can afford. Nothing like the white bread that graces the tables of nobles and bishops. But it is food, and it is filling, and the monks eat it gratefully. The bell sounds for sext, the 6th hour, approximately noon. The monks leave their kitchen tasks to others and process once more to the church. This is another minor hour, brief and functional. A pause in the labor of the day to remember that all work is done for the glory of God. The psalms of sext are appropriate to the midday hour, speaking of the sun at its height, of the heat of the day, of the need for God's protection against the temptations that flourish in the bright light. After sext comes the midday meal, the main meal of the day, the one substantial repast that the monks are allowed. They process from the church to the refectory in order of seniority, the oldest monks first, the youngest novices last. They take their places at the long tables, standing behind their benches until the abbot has said the blessing and given the signal to sit. The silence in the refectory is total, except for one voice. A monk has climbed into the reading pulpit and has opened the book from which he will read throughout the meal. Today it is the dialogues of Saint Gregory the Great, stories of the lives of Italian saints that have been read during meals in this monastery for as long as anyone can remember. The monk's voice is even and measured, pitched to carry to every corner of the room without seeming loud or strained. The food is served by monks assigned to this duty, who move along the tables with pots of the vegetable pottage, ladling portions into wooden bowls. Each monk receives a portion of bread, a bowl of soup, a cup of ale. The food is plain but sufficient, designed to sustain life without encouraging the sins of gluttony or pleasure. The monks eat in silence, their eyes on their food, their ears on the reading, their minds perhaps elsewhere, in that interior landscape where faith and doubt wage their eternal battle. You eat slowly, savoring what sustenance there is. The pottage is thin but flavorful, seasoned with herbs from the garden. The bread is heavy and fills your stomach with a weight that you have come to associate with this hour of the day. The ale is weak, barely alcoholic, but it quenches your thirst and warms you from within. The reading continues throughout the meal. The stories of saints and their miracles filling the silence that the monks themselves observe. When the last bowl has been emptied, the reader closes his book, descends from the pulpit, and takes his place at the table to eat his own meal, which has been kept warm for him. The abbot rises, says a prayer of thanksgiving, and the monks file out of the refectory in the same silence with which they entered. After the midday meal comes a brief period of rest. The rule recognizes that the human body requires recovery, particularly after a morning of labor and a heavy meal. The monks return to the dormitory, where they lie on their beds in silence, neither sleeping nor fully awake, but resting in that intermediate state that allows the body to restore itself. You lie on your back, staring at the wooden beams of the ceiling. The dormitory is quiet, except for the breathing of your brothers, the occasional cough, the creak of a bed as someone shifts position. The light that filters through the small windows is gray and dim, the clouds outside having thickened since morning. You can hear the wind now, moving around the corners of the building, promising the rain that has been threatening all day. The rest period is short, perhaps 30 minutes, before the bell summons the monks to none. The 9th hour, approximately 3 in the afternoon. This is the last of the minor hours, the final punctuation of the working day before the approach of evening. The psalms of nuns speak of the day declining, of the sun beginning its descent towards the horizon, of the need to work while light remains. After none, the afternoon labor begins. You return to the scriptorium, where your morning's work awaits you. The light has changed in your absence, now coming from a different angle, requiring you to adjust the position of your desk. The ink in your pot has thickened slightly and must be thinned with water. The quill you were using has dulled and must be resharpened. The work continues. Letter by letter, word by word, page by page, the psalter grows beneath your hand. The work is tedious and demanding, requiring constant attention, constant correction, constant vigilance against the errors that can so easily creep in when concentration wavers. And yet there is something meditative about it, something that quiets the restless mind and brings a kind of peace that is hard to find elsewhere. The afternoon passes. The light changes again, moving across the room in its slow progression. A scratching of quills fills the silence. The smell of ink and parchment hangs in the air. The rain that has been threatening finally begins. a gentle pattering on the roof that grows louder as the clouds release their burden. The windows grow dark with water, the light dims, and the monks must strain their eyes to continue their work. When the light becomes too dim for safe copying, the master of the scriptorium calls a halt to the day's labor. The monks set down their quills, close their ink pots, cover their manuscripts with cloths to protect them from dust. They have perhaps an hour before the bell will call them to vespers, and this time is their own. Some monks use this hour for private prayer, returning to the church to kneel before the altar in silent supplication. Others walk in the cloister, their steps slow and measured, their minds turned inward. Others sit in their cells. For those who have been monks for many years are sometimes granted the privilege of a small private room, a space of solitude within the communal life. You have no cell of your own. You are still relatively new to this life, still learning its rhythms and its demands. You walk in the cloister, feeling the rain-washed air on your face, listening to the water dripping from the roof into the puddles that have formed on the stones. The garden at the center of the cloister is dark and wet, the herbs beaten down by the rain, the last flowers of autumn drooping under the weight of water dot. The light continues to fade. The gray of the afternoon deepens into the gray of early evening. The rain has stopped, but the clouds remain, heavy and low over the walls of the monastery. Somewhere beyond those walls, the sun is setting, painting the sky in colors that you cannot see. Here, there is only the gradual dimming, the slow approach of night, the bell that will soon call you to the evening prayers. Dot asterisk asterisk, the bell for vespers sounds, as the last light of day is fading. This is the evening office, the counterpart to the morning's lauds, the prayers that mark the transition from day to night. The monks gather in the church for what will be the longest service since Matins, an hour or more of psalms and hymns and prayers that will carry them into the darkness. The church is different in the evening light. The narrow windows that seemed so dim in the morning now glow with the last rays of the setting sun, filtering through the gray clouds in long shafts of gold and red. The candles have been lit on the altar, their flames steady in the still air, casting warm pools of light against the cold stone walls. The smell of incense hangs in the air, a sweetness that cuts through the usual mustiness of the ancient building. Vespers begins with a hymn, the evening hymn that has been sung in this place for centuries. The words speak of light fading, of God's protection through the coming night, of the hope for a new dawn. The melody is ancient and beautiful, rising and falling in patterns that seem to echo the rhythm of the setting sun. The monks' voices blend together, creating a sound that fills the church from floor to ceiling. The psalms of Vespers are psalms of thanksgiving, of reflection, of preparation for rest. They speak of the goodness of God, of the beauty of creation, of the peace that comes from faith. The monks chant them from memory, the words so familiar that they no longer require conscious thought, flowing instead from some deeper place where faith and habit have become indistinguishable. There is a reading from Scripture, a passage chosen for this particular day in the liturgical calendar. Today, it is from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, words about faith and works and the mysterious ways of divine grace. The words are in Latin, and most of the monks understand them only partially, catching a phrase here, a concept there, but the meaning seeps through nonetheless. Carried by the rhythm of the language and the weight of tradition, the canticle of the Blessed Virgin Mary follows. The Magnificat, perhaps the most beautiful of all the evening prayers. My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit hath rejoiced in God my Saviour. The words rise in the candlelit darkness, ancient and eternal, spoken by Mary herself, according to the Gospel of Luke, spoken now by these monks in this cold, stone church as if the intervening centuries had never passed. The prayers of intercession follow, petitions for the church, for the world, for the dead who have gone before, for the monks themselves as they prepare to face another night of prayer and rest. And then the final blessing, the words of dismissal, and the monks file out of the church into the evening darkness. The cloister is black now, the covered walkways pools of shadow lit only by the occasional torch. The rain has started again, a gentle pattering on the stones of the open courtyard. The monks move quickly towards the refectory, for the evening meal awaits. A lighter meal than the midday repast, but welcome nonetheless after the long afternoon of labor. The evening meal is simpler than the midday meal. There is bread, of course, the same dark rye bread that accompanies every meal in this place. There is cheese, hard and sharp, the product of the monastery's own dairy. There is ale, the same weak ale that the monks drink with every meal. And there is fruit, apples from the monastery's orchards. Their skins wrinkled now with age, but their flesh still sweet and firm. The reading continues during the meal. A different monk in the pulpit now, continuing the dialogues of St. Gregory from where the midday reader left off. The stories of saints and their miracles fill the silence, tales of miraculous cures, of demons cast out, of visions granted to those of pure heart. The monks eat in silence, their eyes on their food, their ears on the reading, their minds perhaps wandering to the beds that await them after the final prayers. The meal is over quickly. The monks have been awake since before dawn, and the long day of prayer and labor has taken its toll. Their eyes are heavy, their movements slow, their bodies aching for the rest that will come soon. The abbot says the final blessing. The monks rise from their benches, and the evening silence officially begins. The great silence is different from the working silence of the day. During the day, necessary communication is permitted. Brief words exchanged about work, whispered questions and answers. They facilitate the labor of the community. But from the end of Vespers until after Lauds the next morning, no speech is allowed at all. The great silence is total and complete, a blanket of quietude that covers the monastery like snow. The monks use the brief time between the evening meal and Compline for private devotions. Some kneel in the church before the altar. Some sit in the cloister, their backs against the cold stone columns, their eyes closed in meditation. Some walk slowly through the covered passages, their lips moving in silent prayer. The rain continues to fall, its sound the only voice in the hushed monastery. Asterisk, asterisk, the final bell of the day sounds. Compline, the night prayers, the last office before sleep. The monks gather in the church for what will be a brief but deeply meaningful service. The prayers that will carry them into the darkness of the night. Compl. I is different from the other offices. It is more intimate, more personal, more focused on the individual soul's relationship with God. The Psalms speak of darkness, of fear, of the need for divine protection during the vulnerable hours of sleep. Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. The words are familiar, the words that Christ himself spoke on the cross, the words that Christians have spoken at the moment of death and at the threshold of sleep for 2,000 years. The hymn, of aim, of ah. Compline is one of the most beautiful in the entire liturgy. Te lucis ante terminum, before the ending of the light. The monks' voices rise in the darkness, the candlelight flickering on their faces, the ancient words floating in the cold air of the church. The melody is simple and haunting, a tune that has the quality of a lullaby, a song designed to ease the passage from waking to sleeping. There is a reading, brief and pointed. There is a prayer, asking for protection through the night. There is the Nunc Dimittis, the canticle of Simeon, the words of the old man who held the infant Christ in his arms and declared that he could now die in peace. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. The words are spoken slowly, reverently, as if each monk is preparing for the little death of sleep and the great death that awaits at the end of all his days. The service ends with a final blessing from the abbot. The monks file out of the church in complete silence, the great silence that will hold until morning. They process through the dark cloister, their sandals whispering on the wet stones, their habits rustling in the cold air. They enter the dormitory, find their beds, undress in the darkness, and lie down beneath their woolen blankets, and you lie among them, your body exhausted, your mind still active with the prayers that have filled your day. The bed is narrow and hard, the blanket thin and rough, but these discomforts have become familiar, have even become dear to you, in the way that all the hardships of this life have become dear. They are the marks of your belonging, the evidence of your commitment, the price you pay for the privilege of living in this place of prayer. The rain continues to fall on the roof above. The wind moves around the walls of the monastery, finding its way through the cracks, bringing the smell of wet earth and cold air. Somewhere in the darkness, a monk coughs. Somewhere else, another monk sighs. But no one speaks. The silence is total, the darkness complete, and soon the rhythm of breathing changes as one by one the monks slip into the mercy of sleep. Asterisk, asterisk, you close your eyes. You feel the weight of the day pressing down upon you, the accumulated fatigue of hours of prayer, of labor, of effort. You think of the bell that will sound in a few hours, calling you back from sleep to the darkness of matins. You think of the endless cycle of days that stretches before you, each one the same as the last, each one moving you closer to the death that awaits at the end. And somehow this thought brings not despair, but peace. The repetition is not monotony, but rhythm. The sameness is not boredom, but stability. The cycle is not a trap, but a liberation, freeing you from the chaos of choice, from the anxiety of uncertainty, from the endless question of what to do next. Here, in this place, the answer to that question is always the same. Pray, work, rest, pray again. Sleep takes you. And in your dreams, perhaps you walk through cloisters that never end, through churches where the candles never go out, through fields where the harvest is always golden and always ready. In your dreams, you have been doing this forever and will continue doing it forever. And when the bell sounds in the darkness, calling you back to the world of matins, you will rise as you have always risen, as you will always rise, until the day when you rise no more. Asterisk, asterisk, we have walked together through a single day in the monastery, from the darkness of matins to the darkness of sleep. But to truly understand this life, we must see how it changes and how it stays the same as the year turns through its seasons. For the cycle of the day is nested within the cycle of the year, and both are nested within the cycle of eternity, That is the true time frame of monastic existence. Winter in the monastery is a time of cold that seems to have no end. The stones of the church hold the chill of the frozen ground, and no amount of prayer can warm them. The monk's breath forms clouds in the air during matins, floating in the candlelight like small ghosts. The water in the washing troughs freezes overnight and must be broken with a wooden mallet each morning. The ink in the scriptorium thickens until it will not flow, and the copying of manuscripts must be abandoned for weeks at a time. The days are short and the nights are long. Matins begins in darkness and ends in darkness. Lauds brings no light to the narrow windows of the church. The working hours are compressed, squeezed between the late dawn and the early dusk. The monks spend more time in prayer and less time in labor, not by choice, but by necessity, for there is simply not enough light to work by dot. The food in winter is meager and monotonous. The vegetables from the garden have long since been consumed, and the monks subsist on what can be preserved. Salted fish, dried beans, turnips that have spent months in the root cellar, bread that becomes harder and coarser as the winter wheat runs low. The ale grows thin and sour, the cheese dry and sharp. Every meal is a lesson in gratitude for whatever Providence provides. And yet there is beauty in the winter monastery. There is the beauty of the first snowfall, covering the cloister garden in white, transforming the gray stone walls into something magical. There is the beauty of the Christmas celebrations, when the church is decorated with evergreen boughs and the monks are permitted to sing with more joy than usual. There is the beauty of the long nights of prayer, when the silence is deepest and the presence of God seems closest. Spring comes slowly to the monastery. First, the ice on the washing troughs begins to thaw. Then the first green shoots appear in the garden. Then the birds return, filling the morning air with song. The days lengthen, the light returns, and the monks can once again spend their full hours in the scriptorium, their quills scratching across the parchment as the spring sunshine streams through the windows. Spring is the busiest time in the fields. The ground must be plowed and the seeds must be planted. The monks trade their quills for hoes, their prayer books for seed bags. Even those who usually work indoors are pressed into service in the fields, for the planting cannot wait, and every hand is needed. The work is hard and dirty, the mud clinging to the hems of habits, the blisters forming on hands unused to physical labor. But the work is also satisfying in a way that copying manuscripts can never be: the immediate connection to the earth, to the cycle of growth and harvest that sustains all life. The liturgical season of Lent falls in spring, a time of intensified fasting and prayer in preparation for Easter. The already sparse diet of the monks becomes sparser still. The prayers become longer. The silence is deeper. The monks are reminded of their mortality, of their sinfulness, of their desperate need for the grace of God. And then Easter comes, the great feast of resurrection, and the joy is all the greater for the suffering that preceded it. Summer brings warmth at last to the cold stones of the monastery. The church is almost comfortable during the morning offices, the chill replaced by a pleasant coolness that provides relief from the heat outside. The scriptorium windows are open to let in the breeze, and the smell of flowers from the cloister garden mingles with the smell of ink and parchment. The days are long, and there is time for all the work that must be done. The gardens flourish in summer. The vegetables grow tall and abundant, promising a harvest that will sustain the community through the coming winter. The fruit trees in the orchard set their fruit, apples and pears and plums that will be picked and stored and dried and preserved. The bees in the monastery's hives produce honey, a precious sweetness that the monks use sparingly throughout the year. But summer also brings dangers. Disease spreads more easily in the warm weather, and fevers sweep through the community, striking down monks who were healthy one day and dead the next. The crops are vulnerable to drought, to flood, to the insects that multiply in the heat. The monks pray for rain when the ground is dry. Pray for sun when the rain will not stop. Pray always for the protection of providence against the hazards of the natural world. Autumn is the time of harvest, when all the work of spring and summer comes to fruition. The monks spend long days in the fields, cutting the wheat, gathering the vegetables, picking the fruit from the trees. The work is exhausting, but there is a satisfaction in seeing the storerooms fill, in knowing that the community will have enough to eat through the coming winter. The prayers of thanksgiving at this season are especially heartfelt, born of genuine gratitude for the bounty that God has provided. The liturgical year reaches its climax in autumn with the Feast of All Saints, when the monks remember all those who have gone before them into glory, and with All Souls, when they pray for those who are still on their journey to paradise. The dead are very present in monastic consciousness, not as ghosts to be feared, but as companions on the way, as examples to be followed, as intercessors who pray for the living from their place in heaven. And then the cycle begins again. The days shorten. The cold returns. The snow falls on the cloister garden. And the monks continue their endless round of prayer and labor, as they have done for centuries, as they will do for centuries more. ***, the monastery is a community, and like all communities, it has structure and hierarchy. At the top is the abbot, the father of the community, the one who holds all authority and bears all responsibility. Below him are the various officials who manage the practical affairs of the house. And at the bottom are the ordinary monks, equal to one another in their commitment, but ranked by seniority, by the number of years they have spent in the cloister. ***, the abbot is elected by the monks themselves, chosen from among their number for life. The rule of Saint Benedict is clear that the abbot must be chosen for his virtue, for his wisdom, for his ability to lead the community in the way of God. He need not be the oldest monk, or the most learned, or the one from the noblest family. He must be the one best suited to guide his brothers toward salvation. ***, once elected, the abbot has absolute authority within the monastery. He is the father, and the monks are his children. He assigns their work, directs their prayers, judges their faults, determines their penances. He can be gentle or severe, lenient or strict, as the needs of the community require. But he is also bound by the rule, bound to consult with his monks before making major decisions, bound to act always for the good of the community, rather than for his own comfort or aggrandizement. ***, the prior is the abbot's second in command, appointed by the abbot to assist in the governance of the house. When the abbot is absent, the prior rules in his place. When the abbot is present, the prior handles many of the day-to-day matters that would otherwise distract the abbot from his higher duties. The prior must be loyal to the abbot, supportive of his decisions, a bridge between the authority at the top and the community at the bottom. ***, other officials manage specific aspects of monastic life. The cellarer is responsible for all the material needs of the community, from food to clothing to the maintenance of buildings. He must be wise and prudent, neither wasteful nor miserly, providing enough for the monks to live comfortably without excess. The infirmarian cares for the sick, tending to their physical needs, while others tend to their spiritual needs. The guest master welcomes visitors, seeing to their comfort while protecting the community from excessive intrusion. That the master of novices has perhaps the most important role of all. He is responsible for training those who seek to join the community, forming them in the ways of monastic life before they take their final vows. The novitiate lasts at least a year, and during this time the novice is tested and trained, his commitment examined, his character shaped. Many who enter as novices leave before taking final vows, realizing that this life is not for them. Those who remain become monks for life, bound by vows they cannot break. Among the ordinary monks, seniority matters. Those who have been in the monastery longest have precedence in processions, first choice of seats in the chapter house, and a degree of respect from their juniors. But seniority brings responsibilities as well as privileges. The senior monks are expected to set an example for the juniors, to mentor them, to help them grow in their vocation. And then there are the lay brothers, men who live within the monastery walls, but have not taken the full vows of monastic life. They are usually men from peasant backgrounds, without the education required for participation in the liturgy, without the Latin needed to chant the psalms. They work in the fields, in the kitchen, in the workshops, doing the manual labor that keeps the monastery functioning. They have their own prayers, simpler than those of the monks, and their own quarters, separate from the main dormitory. They are part of the community, but set apart from it, essential but subordinate. This hierarchy is not meant to create inequality for its own sake. It is meant to create order, to ensure that the work of the community is done efficiently and well. The rule is clear that all the monks are equal before God, that the last shall be first and the first shall be last. But in this world, in this practical community of human beings, some structure is necessary. The hierarchy provides that structure, channeling the energies of the community towards its ultimate goal. Asterisk, asterisk, you arrive at the monastery gates as a stranger, a seeker, one who desires to leave the world behind. But you cannot simply walk through those gates and become a monk. The process of becoming a monk takes years, and many who begin do not finish. The monastery protects itself from those who are not suited to this life, and it protects those seekers from making a commitment they will come to regret. The first stage is the postulancy, a period of waiting and observation that begins the moment you knock on that heavy wooden gate. For days, perhaps weeks, you are kept waiting in the guest house, given food and shelter, but not admitted to the community. The monks observe you from a distance, watching how you behave, how you speak, how you conduct yourself when you think no one is watching. They are looking for signs of the calling, or for signs that you lack it. If you pass this initial test, you are admitted as a postulant, a candidate for the novitiate. You receive a simple robe, not the full habit of a monk, but clothing that marks you as someone under consideration. You begin to attend the offices, though you sit apart from the monks. You begin to learn the rhythm of the day, the geography of the monastery, the expectations that will govern your life if you continue. The postulancy lasts perhaps 3 months, perhaps 6. During this time, you are tested in ways both obvious and subtle. You are assigned to menial tasks, the most humble work the monastery has to offer, to see whether pride will cause you to balk. You are denied small comforts, to see whether attachment to the things of the world still holds you. You are questioned about your motives, your background, your sins. Everything is examined, weighed, judged. If you pass these tests, you are admitted to the novitiate, the year of formal training that precedes final vows. You receive the full habit now, though it is blessed differently from those of the professed monks. You are assigned to the Master of Novices, who becomes your guide, your teacher, your judge. Everything you do is observed and evaluated. Every flaw in your character is noted and addressed. The novitiate is intense. You learn the entire liturgy, memorizing the psalms, the hymns, the prayers that will structure your life. You learn the rule, studying each chapter, discussing its meaning, understanding how it applies to every aspect of monastic existence. You learn the practical skills of monastic life, from cooking to gardening to the care of the sick. And you learn about yourself, about your weaknesses and strengths, about the ways in which you will need to grow. If you are to persevere, the Master of Novices is your constant companion during this year. He meets with you daily, hearing your concerns, answering your questions, correcting your errors. He assigns you tasks designed to challenge you, to reveal aspects of your character that might otherwise remain hidden. He is kind but not soft, understanding but not permissive. His job is to form you into a monk, and he takes this job seriously. At the end of the novitiate, if you have persevered, and if the community judges you ready, you make your first vows. These are temporary vows, binding for 3 years, renewable for another 3 if needed. During this time, you live as a full member of the community, participating in all aspects of monastic life. But you can still leave, and the community can still ask you to leave if you prove unsuited. Only after this extended period of probation do you make your final, permanent vows. You prostrate yourself before the altar, lying face down on the cold stone floor, as the monks chant prayers over you. You rise, you speak the words that bind you for life, and you sign the document that records your commitment. From this moment forward, you are a monk until you die. There is no going back, no leaving, no release from the vows you have made. The vows themselves are 3: stability, conversion of life, and obedience. Stability means that you commit to this particular community, to these particular brothers, to this particular place. You will not wander from monastery to monastery, seeking a more congenial home. You will stay here, among these people, for the rest of your days. Conversion of life means that you commit to the ongoing process of spiritual growth, to the continual turning away from sin and towards God. You will never be finished, never complete, always growing. Obedience means that you surrender your own will to the will of your superiors, accepting their decisions as the will of God for you. These vows are demanding. They ask you to give up everything that the world values: freedom, autonomy, the right to choose your own path. In exchange, they offer something the world cannot. Give stability, community, purpose, the peace that comes from knowing exactly what is expected of you, and having the support of your brothers as you strive to meet those expectations. The external practices of monastic life, the prayers and labors and meals and silences, are merely the framework within which the real work of the monastery takes place. That real work is invisible, interior, a transformation of the soul that happens in the hidden chambers of the heart. The monks do not pray and work and fast merely to fill the hours. They do these things to become different people, to be shaped by grace into something closer to what God intended them to be. The spiritual life of a monk begins with the recognition of his own brokenness. He has not come to the monastery because he is holy. He has come because he knows he is not holy, because he knows that left to his own devices, he will never become holy. Because he needs the help of this community and this rule and this endless round of prayer to have any hope of salvation. Humility is the foundation, the starting point, the bedrock upon which everything else is built. The 12 degrees of humility described in the alley rule map out a path of interior transformation. The first degree is the constant awareness of God's presence, the realization that everything you think and do is seen by one from whom nothing can be hidden. The second is the renunciation of your own will, the choice to follow God's will as expressed through your superiors, rather than pursuing your own desires. The degrees continue, each one building on the last, until the 12th degree is reached, the state in which humility has become so much a part of your being that it shows in your posture, your speech, your every action. This progression is not automatic. It is not guaranteed by the mere fact of living in a monastery. Many monks spend decades in the cloister without progressing beyond the first few degrees, trapped by pride or anger or attachment to comfort. The transformation requires effort, constant attention, the willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself, and to change in response. The primary tool for this transformation is prayer, but not prayer as the outside world understands it. The prayer of the monk is not primarily petition, not asking God for things. It is contemplation, the quiet gazing upon the divine, the opening of the self to be filled with the presence of the sacred. The hours spent in the church, chanting psalms and listening to readings, are meant to create a space in which this deeper prayer can happen. The practice called Lectio Divina supports this contemplative prayer. Each day, the monk takes a passage of Scripture and reads it slowly, repeatedly, letting the words sink into his consciousness. He is not looking for information or intellectual understanding. He is looking for encounter, for the moment when the words cease to be words and become instead a gateway into the presence of God. When that moment comes, he sets the text aside and rests in the silence, receiving whatever grace is given. Asterisk, asterisk. The manual labor of the monastery is also part of the spiritual life. Work is not separate from prayer, but continuous with it. The monk who sweeps the floor does so as an act of worship, offering his labor to God, finding in the rhythmic motion of the broom the same meditative quality that he finds in the rhythmic chanting of psalms. The monk who copies manuscripts participates in the preservation of sacred knowledge, contributing to the great work of the Church across the centuries. Even the monk who empties chamber pots can find holiness in his service if his heart is rightly ordered. The challenges to spiritual growth are many. There is acedia, the noonday demon, the spiritual torpor that strikes in the middle of the day and makes all effort seem pointless. There is pride, the conviction that you are better than your brothers, more holy, more committed, more deserving of recognition. There is anger, the flaring of temper when others fail to meet your expectations or when circumstances frustrate your desires. There is lust, the stirring of the body that does not disappear simply because you have renounced the possibility of its satisfaction. The monk battles these demons through the weapons the rule provides. Fasting weakens the hold of the body over the spirit. Prayer reconnects the soul to its source of strength. Confession brings hidden sins into the light where they lose their power. The support of the community provides encouragement when the individual's resolve wavers. The guidance of the abbot and the senior monks offers wisdom, accumulated over years of similar struggles. The goal of this interior work is not the absence of struggle. Even the holiest monks continue to face temptation, continue to fall, continue to need forgiveness. The goal is a gradual transformation, a slow movement towards the love of God and neighbor that is the heart of the Christian calling. The monk who has advanced in the spiritual life is not someone who no longer sins. He is someone who sins less, who recovers more quickly, who returns again and again to the path despite his failures. Asterisk, asterisk. Let us return now to the practical labor that fills so much of the monastic day, the work of the hands that supports the work of the soul. For the monastery is not merely a house of prayer. It is also a farm, a workshop, a small self-sufficient community that must produce much of what it needs to survive. The fields surrounding the monastery require constant attention through the growing season. The monks rise early in spring to turn the soil, breaking up the clumps left by winter's frost, preparing the earth to receive the seeds that will become their food. They plant in rows, as their predecessors have planted for centuries. Wheat and rye and barley for bread, beans and peas for protein, turnips and cabbages and carrots for the evening meal. The planting is done by hand, each seed placed individually in the earth, covered with soil, watered if the rain does not come. The monks work in silence, moving down the rows with the steady rhythm that characterizes all monastic activity. Their habits grow muddy at the hems, their sandals become caked with earth, their hands become roughened by the handles of the tools. But the work is good work, connecting them to the earth that sustains all life, reminding them of their dependence on forces beyond their control. Summer brings the endless labor of weeding and watering, of protecting the crops from the pests that multiply in the warm weather. The monks patrol the fields, pulling weeds, crushing insects, repairing the damage done by birds and rabbits. The work is hot and tedious, the sun beating down on their tonsured heads, the sweat soaking their habits. But the crops grow green and lush in the summer light, promising the harvest that will see the community through another winter. The harvest in autumn is the most intense period of agricultural labor. The wheat must be cut by hand, using sickles that the monastery's blacksmith has sharpened to a razor edge. The sheaves must be bound and stacked, dried in the field before being brought to the barn for threshing. The threshing separates the grain from the chaff, and the grain must then be ground in the monastery's mill, turned into the flour that will become bread. The monastery's orchards require their own kind of attention. The fruit trees must be pruned in winter, their dead wood removed, their living branches shaped to produce the maximum yield. In spring, the bees from the monastery's hives must be released to pollinate the blossoms. In summer, the growing fruit must be protected from birds and insects. In autumn, the ripe apples and pears and plums must be picked, sorted, and stored in the cool darkness of the monastery cellars. The gardens closer to the cloister produce the herbs and vegetables that supplement the diet of grain and preserved foods. These gardens require daily attention, watering and weeding and harvesting. The monks who work here develop an intimate knowledge of plants, learning which herbs heal which ailments, which vegetables grow best in which conditions, how to coax the maximum yield from the limited space available beyond the agricultural work. The monastery has workshops where the practical necessities of life are produced. The bakery operates daily, producing the loaves that feed the community. The brewery produces the ale that accompanies every meal. The laundry washes and repairs the habits that the monks wear. The cobbler makes and repairs sandals. The carpenter maintains the wooden structures of the monastery. The blacksmith forges and repairs tools. Some monasteries are famous for particular crafts. One might be known for its honey, produced by bees that forage in meadows of wildflowers and produce a sweetness prized throughout the region. Another might be known for its wine, the product of grapes grown on south-facing slopes and aged in oak barrels in cool cellars. Another might be known for its cheese, made according to a recipe passed down through generations of cellars. A hard, sharp cheese that improves with age. The scriptorium is itself a workshop, though its products are words rather than things. The manuscripts produced here are valuable, each one representing months of painstaking labor, each one destined for the library of a cathedral or the private chapel of a noble patron. The income from the sale of these manuscripts helps support the monastery, paying for the things that the community cannot produce for itself, the parchment and ink and gold leaf that the copyists use. All of this labor is governed by the same principle that governs everything in monastic life. It is not done for its own sake, not done for profit or achievement or the satisfaction of work well done. It is done as an offering to God, as a form of worship, as a way of participating in the ongoing work of creation. The monk who bakes bread is doing the same thing as the monk who chants psalms, approaching the divine through the materials and methods appropriate to his task. Asterisk in the monastery. As everywhere in the medieval world, illness is a constant companion. The cold and damp of the stone buildings seep into aged bones, causing the joint diseases that leave so many monks bent and crippled by middle age. The close quarters of the dormitory allow infections to spread rapidly, a cough in one monk becoming a fever in the whole community within days. The inadequate diet, especially in winter, leaves the monks vulnerable to diseases of deficiency. And accidents in the fields or workshops can cause injuries that become infected in an age. Without antibiotics. ***, the infirmary stands apart from the main buildings of the monastery, a precaution against the spread of contagion. It is a long room with beds arranged along the walls, each bed equipped with slightly better bedding than the dormitory, for the sick require comfort that the healthy can forego. The windows are larger here, letting in more light and air. A fire burns in the hearth even in summer, for the sick feel cold even when the healthy are warm. The infirmarian is a monk who has acquired some knowledge of healing, either from training before he entered the monastery or from study of the medical texts in the library. He knows which herbs treat which ailments, which foods strengthen the body, which prayers are particularly efficacious for the sick. His knowledge is limited by the standards of his age, but within those limits he does what he can. ***, the monastery's garden includes a section devoted to medicinal herbs. Here grow the plants that the infirmarian uses in his work. Lavender for headaches and sleeplessness, mint for digestive troubles, comfrey for wounds and broken bones, yarrow to stop bleeding, feverfew for fevers, chamomile for anxiety and unease. Each plant has its season, its proper method of harvesting, its way of being prepared for use. When a monk falls ill, he reports to the infirmary, where the infirmarian examines him and determines the treatment. Minor ailments are treated with rest and herbal remedies. More serious illnesses require the full resources of the infirmary, a bed in the sick room, the attention of assistants who watch over the patient through the night, the prayers of the whole community raised on his behalf. The sick are exempted from many of the rules that govern healthy monks. They are allowed to eat meat, which is otherwise forbidden, because the sick need strength to recover. They are excused from the night offices, because sleep is more important for healing than attendance at matins. They may speak when necessary, for the isolation of the great silence can be harmful to those who are suffering. The rule recognizes that the sick have special needs, and it makes provision for those needs. But illness in the monastery is not merely a physical matter. It is also a spiritual opportunity. The monk who suffers is reminded of his mortality, of the fragility of the body, of his dependence on God for every breath he takes. Illness strips away the illusions of self-sufficiency and independence. It reveals the truth that the monk is a creature, limited and vulnerable, sustained only by the grace that flows from a source beyond himself. The brothers visit the sick, for one of the works of mercy is to comfort those who are ill. They come to the infirmary during the free periods of the day, sitting by the bedsides of their suffering brothers, speaking words of encouragement, praying with them. These visits are acts of charity for the visitors as well as for the visited, opportunities to practice the love of neighbor that is at the heart of the Christian life. Death comes often to the medieval monastery. The same conditions that cause illness also cause death, and the same limitations that hamper healing also limit the extension of life. A monk who falls gravely ill may have only days or weeks before the illness runs its course, either towards recovery or towards the grave. The community watches and waits, praying for healing while preparing for death. When death approaches, the whole community gathers. The dying monk is given the last rites, the sacraments that prepare the soul for its journey. He confesses his sins, receives absolution, is anointed with holy oil. The monks kneel around his bed, reciting the prayers for the dying, commending his soul to God. If he is able, he joins in the prayers himself. If he is too weak, he listens, letting the words wash over him as the darkness closes in. The moment of death is marked by the tolling of the bell, a single slow note that announces to the entire community that one of their brothers has departed. The body is washed and dressed in a fresh habit, then carried to the church, where it lies before the altar through the night, while the monks take turns keeping vigil. The funeral mass is said the next morning, and the body is buried in the monastery cemetery, a small plot of ground where rows of simple crosses mark the graves of those who have gone before. The monastery is enclosed, separated from the world by its walls and its rules, but it is not isolated. The world beyond those walls continues to exist, and the monastery must interact with it in various ways. Guests come and go, bringing news from outside. The monastery's products are sold in markets, creating connections with merchants and customers. The bishop exercises authority over the monastery, and the pope exercises authority over the bishop. The monastery exists within a web of relationships that connect it to the larger world, even as it maintains its separation. The guest house is the point of contact between the monastery and most visitors. It stands near the main gate, accessible to travelers without requiring them to enter the cloister. The guest master, a monk appointed for his skills in hospitality, welcomes all who come, asking no questions about their background or purpose. The rule is clear that all guests are to be received as Christ himself would be received, with honor and care. The guest house offers shelter, food, and the warmth of a fire to all who need it. The wealthy and the poor are treated alike, for in the eyes of God all are equal. The pilgrim on his way to a distant shrine sleeps in the same beds as the merchant traveling on business. The nobleman and the peasant eat the same food, served at the same table, by the same hands. The guest master is the monastery's connection to the outside world. He hears the news that travelers bring, stories of wars and plagues, of kings and bishops, of the great events that shape the world beyond the walls. He shares this news with the abbot, who decides how much of it to communicate to the community. Most of the monks care little for the affairs of the world they have left behind, but some knowledge is necessary, if only to pray intelligently for the needs of the church and the world. The monastery also interacts with the world through its economic activities. The products of the monastery, its grain and wine, and manuscripts and crafts, are sold to raise money for the things the community cannot produce for itself. A monk is appointed to handle these commercial dealings, traveling to markets, negotiating with merchants, collecting payments. He must be trustworthy and shrewd, able to get fair value for the monastery's goods without being drawn into the worldly attitudes that commerce can encourage. The bishop exercises authority over the monastery through periodic visitations, inspections during which he examines the state of the community, questions the monks, reviews the finances. These visitations are meant to ensure that the monastery is fulfilling its purpose, that the rule is being observed, that abuses are not creeping in. The monks receive the bishop with all due honor, but they do not always welcome his scrutiny. For the bishop may find fault where none was intended and impose changes that the community resists. The Pope, far away in Rome, is a more distant authority, but no less real. Decisions made in the papal court affect monasteries throughout Christendom. New rules may be imposed, old privileges may be revoked, disputes may be settled by papal decree. The monastery exists within the structure of the church, subject to the same hierarchy that governs all. Christian institutions sometimes the world beyond the walls intrudes in more dramatic ways. War may sweep through the region, and the monastery may find itself in the path of armies. Vikings once raided monasteries along the coasts, killing monks and stealing treasures. Disputes between lords may lead to violence in which the monastery is caught. The walls that separate the monastery from the world offer some protection, but they cannot keep out determined attackers in times of trouble. The monastery may become a refuge for those fleeing the chaos outside. The peasants from surrounding villages seek shelter within its walls when danger threatens. The monks share what they have, stretching their resources to feed and house the refugees. This is not an obligation they chose, but it is one they accept. For charity demands it, and the rule commands it. And sometimes, despite all the walls and rules and separation, a monk finds himself called back into the world. The bishop may summon him to serve in the cathedral. The Pope may appoint him to lead another monastery. He may be sent on a mission to a distant land, carrying the gospel to those who have not heard it. These departures are rare, and they require the permission of the abbot, but they happen. The monastery exists to serve God, and sometimes that service leads beyond its walls. Asterisk, asterisk. Let us return now to the scriptorium, that room of silence and steady labor, where the great work of preservation takes place. For of all the contributions the monasteries have made to civilization, perhaps none is greater than this: the copying and preservation of the written word through the long centuries when the light of learning might otherwise have gone out. The scriptorium is arranged to capture the maximum amount of natural light. Its windows face east and south, catching the morning and midday sun. The desks are angled to receive this light, tilted so that the manuscript lies at the perfect angle for reading and copying. In summer, when the light lasts long, the scribes can work from after prime until near vespers. In winter, when the light fades early, the work must be compressed into the brief hours of adequate illumination. The tools of the scribe are simple but essential. The quill, cut from the feather of a goose or swan, must be shaped with precision, its tip split to hold the ink, its angle adjusted to produce the particular style of letters that this scriptorium uses. The ink, made from oak galls and iron, must be mixed to the right consistency, thick enough to be visible, but thin enough to flow smoothly. The parchment, made from the skin of sheep or calves, must be prepared by scraping and stretching and smoothing until its surface is ready to receive the ink. The work of copying begins with ruling. The scribe takes his parchment and draws faint lines across it, guidelines that will keep his text straight and even. The lines are made with a pointed stylus that leaves an impression without ink, visible to the scribe, but invisible in the finished manuscript. The margins are marked, the spacing between lines calculated, the entire page planned before a single letter is written out, and the copying begins. The scribe reads the text before him, a few words at a time, and reproduces them on the blank page below. Letter follows letter, word follows word, line follows line. The work requires intense concentration, for any error must be scraped away with a knife and corrected, marring the smooth surface of the parchment. A skilled scribe can copy perhaps 4 pages in a day. A complete Bible, with its thousands of pages, might take a single scribe years to finish. Asterisk, asterisk, the texts being copied vary. Some are religious, psalters and Bibles, and collections of sermons and lives of saints. These are the most common, for the demand for religious texts is constant. Churches and cathedrals need Bibles for their services. Nobles want prayer books for their private devotions. New monasteries need copies of the Rule and the writings of the Church Fathers, but other texts are copied as well. The ancient Romans left behind works of philosophy, history, poetry, and science. These texts survived the fall of the empire in the libraries of monasteries, preserved by monks who may not have understood their contents, but recognized their value. Virgil and Cicero, Pliny and Seneca, Boethius and Augustine, all were copied and recopied through the centuries, passed from one scriptorium to another, kept alive when the world outside had forgotten them. The scriptorium also produces illuminated manuscripts, books decorated with paintings and gold leaf that transform them into works of art. The illuminator is a specialized position, requiring skills beyond those of the ordinary copyist. He paints the initial letters that begin each chapter, creating elaborate designs that incorporate figures and scenes. He adds decorations to the margins, vines and flowers and fantastic creatures that frame the text. He applies gold leaf to highlight the most important elements, giving the pages a glow that suggests the divine presence. The most precious manuscripts require months of work. A single illuminated Bible might occupy a team of scribes and illuminators for years, each one contributing his particular skills to the collective effort. The finished product is a treasure, valued not only for its contents, but for its beauty. A fitting vessel for the Word of God. The monastery's library is where the finished manuscripts are kept, along with the ancient texts that serve as models for copying. The library is usually a small room, its walls lined with shelves, its windows shuttered against the light that can fade ink and damage parchment. The books are stored horizontally, their spines facing outward, chained to the shelves in some cases to prevent theft. A catalog records each volume, noting its contents, its condition, its location on the shelves. Access to the library is restricted. Only the librarian and those he authorizes may enter. Books may be borrowed for use in the scriptorium or the church, but they must be returned. The loss of a book is a serious matter, for each one represents months of labor, resources that the monastery can ill afford to waste. The books are the monastery's treasure, more valuable than gold, for they carry the knowledge of centuries that might otherwise be lost. Asterisk, asterisk, the cycle of prayer that structures each day is nested within a larger cycle that structures the year. The liturgical calendar marks the passage of time not by the seasons of agriculture or the movements of armies, but by the events of sacred history. Christmas and Easter, Pentecost and Ascension, the feasts of saints and the fasts of penitence, each has its place in the year. Each brings its particular character to the prayers of the monastery. The liturgical year begins in late November with the season of Advent, 4 weeks of preparation for the coming of Christ. The prayers during Advent speak of waiting and longing, of the darkness that precedes the dawn. The monks fast during this season, eating less than usual, preparing their bodies as well as their souls for the feast to come. The colors of the church decorations change to purple, the color of penitence. The color of kings awaiting their crowning. Christmas arrives on the 25th of December, the feast of the Incarnation, the celebration of God becoming human in the person of Jesus Christ. The monastery is transformed for this feast. The church is decorated with evergreen boughs, symbols of eternal life in the dead of winter. Extra candles are lit, pushing back the darkness of the longest nights. The monks are allowed to sing with more joy than usual, their voices rising in hymns that celebrate the birth of the Savior. The Christmas season extends through Epiphany in early January. 12 days of celebration that contrast with the austerity of Advent. The diet improves during this time, with special foods appearing at the table. The work schedule is lightened, allowing more time for prayer and rest. The community gathers in the chapter house for readings from the Christmas story, the account of the shepherds and the angels, the Magi and their gifts. The flight into Egypt. After Christmas comes ordinary time, a period of weeks without special liturgical significance. The word ordinary here does not mean common or boring. It means ordered, following the regular pattern of the weekly cycle. The Sundays of ordinary time are numbered, first through however many weeks until the next season begins. And the prayers of each Sunday follow a set pattern that varies only in the specific readings chosen. Lent begins 40 days before Easter, on a day called Ash Wednesday. The monks receive ashes on their foreheads, marked with the sign of the cross, reminded of their mortality. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. The season of Lent is a time of intensified fasting and prayer, a time of preparation for the great feast of Easter that lies ahead. During Lent, the monastery becomes even more austere than usual. The diet is reduced to a single meal per day, taken in the evening. The prayers are longer, the silence is deeper. The monks are encouraged to take on additional penances, extra prayers, or acts of self-denial, to prepare themselves for the celebration of the resurrection, Holy Week. The final week of Lent brings the liturgical year to its climax. Palm Sunday commemorates Christ's entry into Jerusalem, and the monks process through the cloister carrying branches. Maundy Thursday commemorates the Last Supper, and the abbot washes the feet of 12 monks in imitation of Christ's humble service. Good Friday commemorates the crucifixion, and the church is stripped of its decorations, the altar bare, the community kneeling in silence before the cross. Easter Sunday breaks the fast and the sorrow of Lent with an explosion of joy. The Easter Vigil begins in darkness, with a fire lit outside the church and a single candle, carried in to symbolize the light of Christ, conquering the darkness of death. The church fills with candlelight as the flame is passed from monk to monk. The Gloria, silenced throughout Lent, is sung again. The Alleluia returns to the liturgy. Christ is risen, and his resurrection promises resurrection for all who believe. The Easter season lasts 50 days, from Easter Sunday to Pentecost. The joy of this season pervades the prayers and the life of the monastery. The Alleluia is sung frequently, reminding the monks of the resurrection. The readings focus on the appearances of the risen Christ to his disciples, preparing them for the coming of the Spirit. Pentecost celebrates the descent of the Holy Spirit on the apostles, the birth of the Church, the beginning of the Christian mission to the world. The monks wear red vestments, the color of fire, symbolizing the tongues of flame that appeared above the heads of the apostles. The prayers speak of power and courage, of the gifts of the Spirit that enable the Church to carry out its mission. After Pentecost, ordinary time resumes, stretching through the long months of summer and autumn until Advent comes again. This period includes numerous feasts of saints, days when the prayers focus on a particular holy man or woman whose life provides an example for the monks. Some saints are celebrated throughout the church. Others are particular to this monastery, local saints whose relics may rest beneath the altar, whose stories are told and retold in this place. The liturgical year thus provides a structure for the experience of time. Each season has its character, its mood, its particular grace. The monk who lives within this cycle is shaped by it, formed by the repeated experience of waiting and fulfillment, of fasting and feasting, of sorrow and joy. The year becomes a spiral rather than a circle. Each pass through the cycle, taking the monk deeper into the mysteries it celebrates. Asterisk, asterisk, the monastery has stood for centuries, and it will stand for centuries more. But the individual monk who inhabits it has only his allotted span, and that span moves inexorably towards its end. The young novice who entered the gates full of hopes and fears becomes the middle-aged monk who has settled into the routine, and then the elderly monk who can barely rise from his bed for matins. The journey is the same for all, though the path may vary. Old age in the monastery is a time of diminishing capacity and increasing contemplation. The elderly monk can no longer work in the fields. His eyes are too weak for the scriptorium. His voice falters during the chanting of psalms. He spends his days in the cloister, sitting in a sunny corner when there is sun, wrapped in an extra blanket against the cold, watching the younger monks go about the tasks that he once performed. The community cares for its elderly members, for they are not burdens, but treasures. They carry the memory of the monastery's past, the stories of abbots and monks long dead, the traditions and customs that must be passed from generation to generation. The young monks sit with them, listening to their reminiscences, absorbing the wisdom that only experience can teach. The elderly monk has time for prayer that the younger monks lack. He can spend hours in the church, kneeling before the altar, his lips moving in the prayers that have shaped his entire life. He can meditate on the mysteries of faith that he has contemplated since his novitiate. He can prepare his soul for the meeting with God that now cannot be far away. When death finally comes, the elderly monk is ready. He has lived his whole adult life in preparation for this moment. He has confessed his sins, received absolution, been anointed with the holy oil that will strengthen him for his final journey. He lies in his bed, surrounded by his brothers, hearing their prayers, feeling their presence. And then he is gone. Asterisk, asterisk, the community mourns its dead, but not as those without hope. The monk has died, but he has not ceased to exist. He has simply moved from one stage of existence to another, from the earthly life of prayer and labor to the heavenly life of eternal contemplation. The monks pray for his soul, asking God to receive him into paradise. They pray for themselves, asking for the grace to follow where he is gone. The burial takes place in the monastery cemetery, a quiet plot of ground where simple wooden crosses mark the graves. The abbot says the prayers for the dead. The community responds with amens. The body is lowered into the ground. The earth is filled in. The cross is planted, and another name is added to the long list of those who have died in this place. But the monastery continues. New novices arrive at the gate, seeking the same peace and purpose that brought the dead monk here so many years ago. They take up the tasks he has laid down, the work in the scriptorium, the prayer in the choir, the labor in the fields. They become what he was, members of this community, inhabitants of this place, participants in the endless cycle of prayer and work. The monastery is not a collection of individuals. It is a living organism, continuously renewing itself as old members die and new members join. The rule remains the same. The prayers remain the same. The rhythm of the day and the cycle of the year remain the same. Only the faces change, and even they bear a certain resemblance to one another, shaped by the common life, marked by the common disciplines, formed by the common pursuit of God. Asterisk, asterisk, we have walked together through the hours and the seasons, through the years and the generations. We have seen the monastery wake in the darkness before dawn and sleep again in the silence after Compline. We have seen the fields planted and harvested, the manuscripts copied and illuminated, the prayers chanted and whispered. We have seen monks enter as eager novices and leave as aged corpses. We have seen the wheel of time turn and turn again. Now the hour grows late. The candles have burned low, and the darkness is gathering in the corners of the room. The sounds of the monastery are fading. The last footsteps in the cloister, the last whisper of a prayer, the last settling of the ancient stones. The world outside the walls is silent, the birds asleep, the wind still, the whole earth waiting for the dawn that will come in a few hours. You lie in your bed in the dormitory, your brothers sleeping around you. The straw mattress has conformed to the shape of your body, comfortable now in a way that seemed impossible when you first arrived. The woolen blanket holds your warmth against the cold night air. Your eyes are closed, but you are not yet asleep. In your mind, the prayers of the day continue to echo. The psalms you chanted at Vespers, the readings you heard at Compline, the words that have become so familiar that they no longer require conscious thought. They have seeped into you, become part of you, shaped the very structure of your mind. Even in sleep, you know, they will continue, for the monks believe that the soul prays even when the body rests. Tomorrow will bring the same pattern that today brought. The bell will sound in the darkness. You will rise and dress and process to the church. You will chant the psalms of matins, the hymns of lauds, the prayers that have been spoken in this place for centuries. You will eat your bread and do your work and keep the silence that has become as natural as breathing. And this pattern will continue, day after day, year after year, until the day when the pattern is broken by your own death. And even then, it will continue, for the monastery does not depend on any single monk. It will go on without you, as it went on before you, as it will go on long after everyone now living has turned to dust. This is the life you have chosen. This is the life that has chosen you. And in its endless repetition, in its crushing monotony, in its relentless sameness, there is a kind of peace that the world outside can never know. The peace of certainty, the peace of belonging, the peace of a life ordered entirely around the pursuit of the divine. The darkness is complete now. The last traces of consciousness are fading. The rhythm of your breathing is slowing, deepening, becoming the breath of sleep. And somewhere in the church, a candle still burns before the altar, a small flame in the vast darkness, keeping watch through the night until the bell sounds again and the cycle begins anew. Sleep now. Rest in the silence of the stones. Let the prayers carry you into the dreams that are perhaps themselves a form of prayer. And when the bell sounds, when the darkness breaks, when the new day calls you back to the choir and the cloister and the endless round of work and worship, rise again as you have always risen, as you will always rise, until the day when rising is no longer possible and the sleep becomes eternal. The monastery waits. The prayers continue. The wheel of time turns. And in this ancient place, where so many have lived and died in the pursuit of something beyond themselves, the faithful sleep, the sleep of those who have found their home. This has been the Night Archivist. Thank you for walking these silent corridors with me tonight. May you find rest in the peace of these ancient walls, and may your sleep be deep and undisturbed. Until next time, when we shall walk together through other forgotten places, other quiet hours, other stories waiting to be told in the darkness.